The U.S. charges against senior figures in Hamas are a crucial step in bringing Hamas leaders to justice and revealing the terrorist group's crimes. The U.S. Department of Justice announced that it was unsealing of terrorism, murder conspiracy, and sanctions evasion charges against 6 senior leaders of Hamas, a designated foreign terrorist organization, on September 3. This is essential because it marks a turning point in the public effort to bring Hamas to justice. While the US and other Western countries may have been working behind the scenes for almost 11 months since the October 7 attack, this unsealing of public charges will make it harder for Hamas to escape justice. Hamas has been playing since October 7. It had hoped that Qatar and Egypt might help it broker a deal. It had been using hostages to get this deal. However, it recently murdered 6 hostages, including an American citizen. Hamas believed it could kill the hostages because it had already murdered more than 1,000 people, including numerous Americans, on October 7. Hamas leaders have been residing in Doha, Qatar. Qatar is an American major non-NATO ally. Former Hamas leader Khaled Mashal recently gave a speech at a conference in Istanbul calling for more attacks on Israel. Istanbul is a member of NATO in Turkey. Hamas believed that it had protection from Turkey and Qatar and that because of this, it could commit a massacre of people in Israel and murder hostages and that there would be no charges. It believed this because it had carried out numerous murderous bombings in the 1990s and early 2000s, and its leaders were never charged. Furthermore, Hamas leaders were welcomed in Doha in 2012. Qatar became a major non-NATO ally of the US, meaning Hamas believed that its patrons in Doha were being rewarded for hosting it. After October 7, Hamas members in Doha openly called for more attacks. They also flew back and forth to Turkey, Iran, Russia, and China to coordinate efforts against Israel. They believed Israel was isolated. They murdered the 6 hostages, Harsh Goldberg-Pollen, Gideon Yerushalmi, Ori Danino, Alex Lobanov, Kamal Gat, and Almag Sarusi, and assumed there would be no consequences. What Hamas did not expect is that the U.S. Department of Justice had a sealed series of charges and that the U.S. was just waiting to release it. The U.S. has now openly said that Hamas is responsible for planning, supporting, and perpetrating the October 7 massacre and that Hamas murdered over 40 American citizens. Hamas may now be learning what Osama bin Laden and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, leaders of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, learned in the past. They thought they could murder thousands and get away with it. However, both of them found out that the U.S. does not forget. They were both hunted down. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland speaks at the Justice Department. Zaka Legal Institute, on behalf of 28 other organizations, has sent him documentation on how groups like Students for Justice in Palestine have coordinated and executed mass deprivations of rights of Jewish students. The U.S. has indicted several Hamas members that Israel already killed. These include Mohammed Deif, Marwan Issa, and Ismail Haniyeh. However, the unsealed U.S. charges also include Yahya Sinwar, Khaled Mashal, and Ali Baraka. The U.S. Department of Justice notes that Mashal is effectively responsible for Hamas' official presence outside of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Mashal is based principally in Qatar. This is calling out Qatar, and now, every time Doha is praised by the US for its role in ceasefire talks, it is worth mentioning that the US is seeking to arrest Mashal, who lives in Doha. Furthermore, Ali Baraka, a Hamas leader in Beirut, is now also being called out. The US says he has been Hamas head of national relations abroad since approximately 2019 and was previously Hamas representative in Lebanon. Baraka is based principally in Lebanon. The U.S. charges against Hamas don't leave much to the imagination. They detail its historic role in terror. They also detail how it has been involved in the murders and kidnappings of countless innocent civilians, including American citizens, which was the culmination of Hamas' decades-long campaign of terrorism and violence against Israel and its allies, including American citizens. The US must also singled out the murder of Goldberg Pauline. This weekend, we learned that Hamas murdered an additional 6 people they had kidnapped and held captive for nearly a year, including Goldberg Pauline, a 23-year-old Israeli American. We are investigating Hash's murder and each and every one of Hamas' brutal murders of Americans as an act of terrorism. The charges unsealed today are just one part of our effort to target every aspect of Hamas operations. These actions will not be our last. The US is putting Hamas on notice. For almost 11 months, Hamas had privilege. It believed it was fighting Israel and that, with backing from Russia, China, Iran, Qatar, and Turkey, it could isolate Israel. Up until late August, Hamas believed it was winning. It was hoping that it could hold out and not release hostages, that it could openly murder hostages, and that its leaders would still relax in Doha, Ankara, Beirut, and Ankara. Stay updated with the latest news. Subscribe to the Jerusalem Post newsletter. Subscribe now. That is why Hamas made videos of the 6 hostages it murdered and has been releasing them. Hamas believes there are no consequences to its actions. It has friends in high places, or so it believed. It has worked with international organizations over the years. It has openly placed its members in these organizations. It has used schools and shelters for terrorist purposes and tunneled under UN sites. It has used universities and hospitals. All of these exploitation of civilian institutions are war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, Hamas believed it could continue to do this without any kind of indictment on the international level. The US decision fundamentally changed things. Israel has captured a large number of Hamas members, but it has not put them on trial for October 7. Now that the US has moved forward, it may be time for Israel also to bring the Hamas members to trial so that there can be a kind of closure. This would be akin to bringing Adolf Eichmann to trial and lead to a kind of catharsis. Why is this important? Public trials and criminal indictments are essential because they create a public record of crimes. It makes it harder to release the criminals. It makes it harder for them to get endless deals and also jet between various Western allies. Hamas members used to travel in the West. Hamas leader Musa Mohammed Abu Mazouk, for instance, was arrested in the US in 1995. After the trial, he moved to Jordan. He enjoyed a life of privilege in the US for a decade, and he even obtained residency. This was even though Hamas was already carrying out murderous attacks. Mazouk enjoyed privilege after leaving the US, giving interviews for years, and being coddled by Western media like other Hamas members such as Ghazi Ahmed. This has been the historic method of Hamas. Hamas has always believed that it could exploit the West and use its contacts in places like Doha to fund Western support. Within days of the October 7 attack, for instance, many pro-Hamas groups in the West were already mobilizing support. They praised Hamas for resistance and printed up posters with hang gliders praising the murder of Israelis. Even though Hamas committed the worst massacre of Jews since the Shoah, college students in the US mobilized to help rip down the posters of hostages held by the group. As the first anniversary of October 7 approaches, many of these college groups continue to praise Hamas. The US indictment of Hamas leaders sends a message. It says that this is not resistance but rather murder. For decades, Hamas and its leadership have dedicated themselves to the eradication of the State of Israel and to murdering, maiming, and brutalizing anyone, including dozens of Americans who stood in their way, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams for the Southern District of New York said. The U.S. document accusing Hamas leaders of a plethora of crimes details the group's rise and also its backing by Iran. This is a historic document. It is a significant shot in the war on terror and the war to hold Hamas accountable for October 7. By releasing these charges, the US is doing an essential service to the cause of justice. This is an article from the Jerusalem Post at September 4, 2024. Please check the link at the description. Pictures gotten from internet and may not correlate with the audio. If you like the video, please subscribe. Thank you for listening.